Hello, good morning. So further to what Chris has done, so Whistling Woods, which is the school I work for back in India, it's a film school. We're members of the VRIF as well. Our logo was up there. And I'm going to talk a little more about cinematic VR as to how we have gone about creating India's first generation of cinematic VR filmmakers. What's the process that we have followed, and where are we right now? So first is the foundation of why we need to do this. Is essentially it's the fourth content platform after film, television, and OTT. And we have to stop treating it as a fourth screen and actually treat it as the fourth platform. When you treat it as the fourth platform, you will start to create and produce content for it separately, uniquely. India has a huge market. We have about 510 million internet users. We have over 300 million VR-ready consumers. The goal is to get them from being VR-ready to VR consumers, and that's really what the lab is looking at doing. So how have we approached it? We've approached it on 4 paradigms: technology, business, content, and finally problem solving. So let's look at it from the tech side, right? You saw the hype curve that Chris showed. So this is the one for 2017 where VR was kind of here, and this is the curve for 2018. It's off the Gartner hype cycle. Now it means 2 things. One, it is no longer emerging technology, but it's emerged, and it's no longer hype. It's reality, right? So this gives us more confidence that VR is here to stay. A good sign of it being off the tech cycle is the hype cycle is that you have a stabilized tech pipeline. You've got your acquisition down to 2 or 3 types of cameras. You've got in-camera stabilization, you have in-camera stitching, you've got your post pipeline lined up, you have a distribution pipeline lined up, and then you have multiple playback and viewing options. Now let's look at it from the business side, right? So I don't want to get too much into numbers, but yes, as you can see, headset sales are up, software sales are up, hardware sales are up. So we have come out of the trough, and we're starting to now move at a normal, regular pace. This is probably one of the most interesting slides you'll ever have, is because Greenlight surveyed both VR users and people who are not VR users. So people who have never used, the entire population, about 75% of them wanted to watch music and videos in VR. Whereas of people who are existing owners of VR headsets, for them it was actually 87%. That means it works. It's not a letdown. People aren't disillusioned with it as the fourth platform. And it's pretty much across the board, whether it's live sports. People who've done it once or twice want to do it again. They have more confidence, right? These are the business models. This is a hypothesis that the school has put out where we see the VR industry getting into, which is on a value-volume mix. So you've got your mobile plus headset, you have your wireless connected HMDs, your standalones, and then you have the high-value ones, which are your tethered HMDs, the seated experience, and the location-based VR experiences, right? And if you had to look at it scale-wise, this is how you'd probably look at it. Now, the most important part, which is the content or the experience, because as a film school, that's really what we teach our students. We teach the craft. Again, don't want to spend too much time on it, but essentially, if you look at it as each as a separate platform, and then you've got essentially what's the USP for film, for TV, for OTT, and for VR, right? And it's the USP that informs the type of content that gets created for it. Film is a larger-than-life audiovisual narrative spectacle. Television allows for appointment viewing. Digital has high concept, pace is critical. It's an individual viewing experience, so lower inhibitions. For VR and AR, we still have to find what the USP is, and that is what the first generation of mass VR filmmakers will discover for themselves, right? So essentially, creation of a value snacking content category is where we see this happening. VR is likely to revive or to build up the short fiction market, which essentially has always taken a backseat to long format film. And the reason why VR will revive it is because the immersion will make up for the brevity, and people will still get a wholesome experience even within 5-10 minutes. Right? Now, this is another curve which is very similar to the Gartner hype cycle, but this is actually a psychology curve. So Dunning-Kruger effect maps confidence and knowledge skills. So when you have no confidence and no knowledge, you're essentially here. And then you have a little bit of knowledge, and suddenly you're on top of Mount Stupid, right? Because you think you know everything. And then you learn a little bit more, and then you realize that, shit, I know nothing. And then you're in the valley of despair. And so the VR has gone down this journey. Then some wisdom starts to get in, and then you realize what's the actual path you need to take to, hit the slope of enlightenment and become the guru. Now, this is where we are. This is encouraging. A lot of content formats actually die out here. Like 3D pretty much died out here. VR as a platform has been able to bring itself out of the content problem that it had, and is able to now structure a way forward on how it's going to move. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but essentially you've got 3 content levers, and depending on which of the levers you pull how hard, you will have a particular kind of immersive content being created. So you have agency, speed, and emotion. And a combination of these 3 will essentially allow you to create whatever type of cinematic VR content that you want. So if it's limited emotion, more control, and more speed, it's likely to be game-like. If you want more fiction, then there is less agency. You have to give less agency to the user, to the viewer. You have to retain more agency as the content creator. And obviously, it has to be an emotional experience. So this is film. And if it's live VR, then honestly, the speed is one thing that nobody can control in that place. But the user does have full agency, and it's an emotional experience because of the live. So these are levers that we've identified which we can give out to students as they start writing their content and as they start planning it. Right? This is another good understanding of production complexity as to what the overall production complexity of your VR project would be like. So you look at reality, interaction, and movement, and if it's rendered, simulated, or actual, active observer, passive observer, free movement, fixed point. And the more from the upper box you have, the higher the production complexity. The more from the lower box you have, the lower the production complexity. So this gives filmmakers, producers, students a good idea of what is it that I'm trying to attempt, right? Am I ready to attempt something with this kind of production complexity? Should I be making some changes to my structure? The last part and the most important part is problem solving. Now, just don't take a photograph of this slide because I've borrowed it from Felix and Paul. It's an internal presentation. Essentially, this is an incomplete list according to Felix and Paul. And those of you who watched VR content would know Felix and Paul probably are the world's best content creators in VR at this point of time, right? So I've taken that and we've crystallized it into these are the problems to solve in VR. So there's standard, security, acquisition, file formats, workflow distribution, software, computing requirements, awareness, and educating content creators. Now, the good thing is that as a film school, this is all that we care about, right? We've got the VRIF that's doing things like standards. We have security, which are both standards bodies and health departments are looking at it. We've got acquisition and data management is hyperdynamic. It will never be solved. There will always be, somebody will want to make a camera with a faster bit rate, and somebody will want to do something, and somebody will want to do something. So it's never going to end. For us as a school, it's been about educating content creators and building awareness. So that's why we set up the lab. Essentially, it was a simple 4-step process. Set up infrastructure, set up an advisory board, bring a bunch of technology partners on board, learn ourselves, write the curriculum so that we can start teaching it to students. So these are our tech partners. It's been an 18-month experience now that we've had, and we've gone up and down, up and down, up and down with several of them. I think I can see a couple of them. 1, 2, they're here. VRIF is here as well. And then we built out a bunch of advisors. So the head of Intel VR, the head of Adobe Immersive, Arvind from Unity, who's sitting here, Christian, thank you. So again, we're a film school. We're going to need help from outsiders who've done this before, who've done a decent amount of experimentation, and that's what we did. So where are we now as a school? Oh. So if you look at a simple process, if you look at the simple kind of the pyramid, we actually started right at the bottom. So what we observed was most of the VR content that was being created was actually being created here and here, which is very counterintuitive to the fact that you want mass adoption. If you want mass adoption, you have to start at this. If you can make compelling VR content that will make people who have a decent quality cell phone go out, buy the headset, and start consuming at least 2 to 3 or 5 minutes of VR content every day, that's when you take it up. So we have to enable students to do this first. And then you move up, and then you move up, and then you move up. So our stage 1, which is completed now of 18 months, we have a curriculum in place for a 3-DOF single point view, non-room scale VR curriculum in place. You'll start to see, hopefully, some content emerging from India over the next 12 to 18 months. So yeah, that's where we are. Next target in a couple of years from now is where we will move on to volumetric capture. We'll move into room scale VR. We'll move into 6-DOF, which will then start help us create content for the top half of this pyramid. But we've decided to take the bottom-up approach. So we've built some strong community awareness in India through seminars and discussions, etc., etc. But being the premier film school in India, it's easier for us. We're able to reach out to the brightest minds in India and help them come on board and take their points of view. So for the first time, the Select World Congress is essentially it's like the UN of film schools. And they have a World Congress every 2 years. So we hosted the one in 2018, and the theme was directing attention in immersive. So we managed to get the top 150 film schools of the world to come in and start thinking about how they need to build their curriculum to factor in VR as the 4th platform, right? Now, what are the key learnings that we've had on the way, right? This is, there is no such person as a VR expert, right? Doesn't exist. The other thing is, don't bore people. So don't just dump them in the ocean and have them watch sharks because, let's have a story going, let's have something else going. Don't confuse people. Just because you have 360 doesn't mean that you have to put in content everywhere. Don't give them whiplash to move their neck. Don't, it's not a treasure hunt. They don't get a prize if they find something inside the global sphere. And don't make people vomit. It's probably the most important. Because, I have seen people vomit. People have thrown up on my shoes. It's not pleasant for either of them. And the last and the most important rule is back up your data. It's just ridiculous amounts of data. You have no idea how much data there is. And, when you start to shoot, you'll realize. Now, seriously, some of the, I would like to say rules, but not really, more guidelines. You have to look at a VR film as actually an experience of which the story, the sound, everything play an important part. So when somebody is actually sitting down to write, you have to have your audiographer with, because the audiographer needs to write the sound story as well while you're writing the narrative story. If you decide to make it interactive and you build in pauses for the user or the viewer to do something, the sound guy needs to do that as well when he's writing, right? So it's very important to build these, and this is a kind of a different practice from what you would do in film, TV, and OTT. Cinematic grammar needs to be completely rewritten because it's a frameless format. There is no frame. Your viewer's eyes are your frame, right? So essentially, it's about directing attention. It's about understanding immersion as a sense. Every VR shot is a VFX shot, so you have to treat it like that. You have to treat it with that much respect. There is almost no shot in VR that you can just show up, put a camera, and start shooting. It's not possible. You could do it in planar or flat screen filmmaking, not in VR for sure, right? So what next? Where do we see this going? in the next couple of 2-3 years. So widespread fiction narrative, immersive and interactive experiences in all the content and business models. First generation of cinematic VR content creators to emerge by 2021. So you should have enough content creators more than the fingers on two hands. And you'll start to see some content come in on a regular basis. Increased festival inclusion, dedicated VR film festivals. We're already starting to see it. Venice has a huge pavilion for VR screens. I think this year they've got about 120 odd pieces. Tech pipeline, which is really where it's there, but it just needs to get better. So better sensors, better storage, faster storage, native spatial audio in all headsets and mobiles. This is very, very important because it gives you a wholesome experience when you have native spatial audio. And yeah, I mean, maybe 5G for high quality streaming, though from what Rob and Tiled Media have done, you don't need it. You can comfortably do it on 4G. Right? Last slide, game changers. And I am not being paid to say this. This is just our experience of almost everything that we've used in version 1.0, version 2.0 of the VR pipeline, what has been game changers for us. So the Obsidian, the 6K acquisition at 120 frames really, really changed because we were able to fix problems, we were able to do things that you couldn't do in 30 frames or 60 frames. So the 120 frames really, really helped us. Mystica, I don't know if you've used it, but it's an absolute parallax killer. We've been able to have objects as close as 6 inches to a camera where the stereo ODS stops working, and we've been able to fix it in Mystica. I don't know what they've done to write the software, but it just works, right? So the Dear VR Pro and Spatial Connect, thank you, Christian. An audiographer's biggest pain when they're mixing spatial audio is because they have to mix it on the computer, and then they have to put the headset on and then listen, and then it doesn't work, so they have to take the headset on and then again mix it, and then again put it on, and half the frustration is in the taking off and the putting on. Now with Spatial Connect, you can mix in headset on the Rift, right? And that's really what we have observed. Game engines, world building and render has never been as easy as it has been in our game engine. So thank you, Unity. It's really, literally in a few clicks of a few buttons, you're able to build the world around you. Tiled Media. So I don't know if anybody experienced it yesterday. I think it's happening today as well, Rob? Oh, yeah. OK. So we're being live streamed in 8K. And Tiled Media has done it. I saw some of the content yesterday on the headset. It's absolutely fabulous. Less than 20 seconds between end to end, so between lens to my headset. So it's seriously going to be a game changer, especially in live events coverage, live sports coverage. And the Oculus Go Quest, which is what Chris was talking about, no wires, 6 DOF. I need to be able to move around. So these are what has, I would like to say, moved the industry from V 1.0 to 2.0, and it gives us confidence that it's around the corner. Thank you.